Hello and welcome to The Mint. I'm Cecilia Kamputa and we're coming to you live from our ZN studios in Harare, Zimbabwe. Now ahead on our show, the recent cabinet briefing meeting held at the Munumutapa building saw the announcement of key developments, current and future in Zimbabwe, that have a bearing on the Zimbabwean economy. From the briefing, the power situation is expected to improve as water levels are increasing significantly on the Zambezi River. Also from the briefing, tonnage submitted to the GMB by farmers is set to hit 2 million tons on the back of a good rainy season in the 2024-25 agricultural season. We also take a look at highlights from the mining sector and from Treasury. I speak to core anchor and financial analyst Eben Mabunda after the break. Don't go anywhere. The Mint will be right back. Welcome back to The Mint. I'm Cecilia Kamputa and we're joining you live from our ZN studios in Harare, Zimbabwe. Now, as I alluded to before the break, on today's episode on The Mint, we explore the recent cabinet briefing whose submissions have an economic bearing on the Zimbabwean economy. I speak to core anchor and financial analyst Eben Mabunda. Hello, Eben. Welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to sit on this end of the conversation, Cecilia.
Now, to get the ball rolling, from the briefing, it was reported that the agricultural sector is showing strong momentum, with maize production for the 2024-25 season expected to deliver the country's fourth highest harvest in record. Information Minister Jennifer Muswere spoke to the media.
The report indicates that the area planted in terms of maize increased from 1.7 hectares in terms of millions in the 2023 to 2024 season to 1.8 million hectares in the 2024-2025 season. The 6.4% increase in terms of the targeted 1.8 hectares. Based on this assessment, maize production in the 2024-2025 season is estimated at 2,293,556 metric tons, which is the fourth highest ever in terms of production in the country. The area planted in terms of traditional grains increased by 7% to 434,000 hectares in the 2024-2025 season and is 4% above target. The pure millet planted area increased to 251,265 hectares, reflecting a 29% increase from the 194,232 hectares planted last year. The production of traditional grains is estimated at 634,650 metric tons as follows: sorghum 436,784 metric tons, pure millet 188,261 metric tons, and finger millet 9,605 metric tons. The sorghum production is the highest in the country's history. The total cereal production in the 2024-2025 season is estimated at 2,928,000 metric tons. This represents a 290% increase in food production compared to the 2023-2024 season. The country will realize a surplus of 1,225,000 metric tons that will go into the strategic grain reserves at local and national levels. The production of tobacco, cotton and sunflower increased by 15%, 52% and 303% respectively. The total national head is at 5.7 million, a 0.4% increase in terms of the statistics. A total of 94,623 metric tons of beef was produced in 2024. Mashonaland East, Manicaland and Midlands provinces were the top milk producing provinces in the 2024 season, accounting for 89% of the country's production of 115 million liters last year, which is a 10% increase from last year. Overall fish production in 2024 is at 31,296 metric tons, while crocodile skin sales increased by 34%.
Now, even when we take a listen to the figures that the minister was putting through, how important is this when you look at maize production towards food security in Zimbabwe?
Look, 2.9 million tons, that's quite a good figure where Zimbabwe's grains production is actually concerned. Zimbabwe requires just about between 1.5 and 1.8 million tons for it to attain that degree of food security per annum. So at this particular point, we actually have surpassed that by over 1 million tons. That's according to the projections that are being released there. And so this would have that effect of ensuring that there is food security within the economy. When you look at the yesteryear, at this time, we were speaking of about 6 million people that were in need of food aid owing to a deficit that had been created. So now that we're speaking of an excess or a surplus of over 1 million tons, that would actually be a positive. It means that in the rural areas there in Mvurwi, in Cholocho, it means that they have the much needed grain. But also of importance is the fact that we are seeing a record high output in terms of the sorghum, of course, grain there, and that would have that positive impact. There is a clamor that has been growing across the board to explore other grains as opposed to just sticking to the maize grain, as has been the case over the past several decades. So that obviously is a boon for the country's food security and would ensure that there is enough for everyone across the country.
All right, and when you look at Zimbabwe's industry, it is closely linked to agriculture. What does this mean for Zimbabwe's agriculture sector?
Well, Cecilia, 40% of the inputs into Zimbabwe's industry is sourced from the country's agricultural sector. So in a sense, there would be that trickle-down effect in terms of how things play out in agriculture, influencing the trends where the country's industry is concerned. So even when you look at the 2024 manufacturing sector industry capacity utilization, you'd find out that there was a dip in 2024 from the 2023 outturn. Also influenced by how things had played out where the country's agricultural sector is concerned. So with that, there would be expectations that we should see all things being equal, ceteris paribus, in the 2025 when the figures are tabulated, you can expect an increase also where the manufacturing sector utilization is concerned. So by and large, there would be very strong linkages that exist between the country's agriculture as well as the country's industry in a nutshell.
Now, even when we're talking about agriculture, we also have to take into consideration how we suffered shocks of El Nino in the previous seasons. How can Zimbabwe reinforce its agriculture against climate change?
Well, climate change is here, and climate change is here to stay. Yes, indeed, we are celebrating a good agricultural outturn 2024-2025 on the back of a good rainy season, but not very far. The prior agricultural season, we were lamenting because of the El Nino. So what this means is that we need to look at climate proofing and several strategies to see to it that we're able to cover and ensure security where the country's agricultural sector is concerned. There would be several strategies that would need to look at. 75% of Zimbabwe's 10,000 water bodies without irrigation, so we need to see to that we're able to protect some of those water bodies, ensure that we're able to ensure that we've got irrigation in place for the lean seasons and when they do play out. At the same time, we need to look at traditional grains. It's a good report that sorghum is indicating a positive, and there has been that record outturn. We also need to be looking at the finger millet and several other grains that were the mainstay of Zimbabwe before the coming in of maize. So even as there's been a growing clamor from health experts to lean more towards traditional grains as opposed to the maize and some of these grains that have come in recent years, it would be important for Zimbabwe to conscientize its populace where those grains are concerned, as they would also help to help Zimbabwe navigate some of those turbulent seasons that are marked by the climate change.
So we continue in an issue that is also linked to climate change. The power situation is expected to improve as water levels are increasing significantly on the Zambezi River. Let's listen to Information Minister Jen Van Square for more.
Cabinet received an update on the country's power supply situation and the Zambezi River water inflows at Victoria Falls. Cabinet noted that inflows on the Zambezi River at Victoria Falls have improved greatly. Tourists visiting the Victoria Falls from now on will be able to enjoy the spectacle more than before. Cabinet therefore invites all citizens and tourists the world over to visit the mighty Victoria Falls.
Now, even when we move from the issue of power generation and power supply, the minister touched on the issue of tourism. How might the changes in the water levels affect industries like tourism, maybe agriculture, that rely on the Zambezi for water?
Look, the elephant in the room there would be the power situation in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe requires over 2,000 megawatts of power to ensure that the lights are on and industry is working as should. But in recent years, Zimbabwe has been falling short of meeting that particular threshold owing to some antiquated equipment in Wange and some of the units failing to be operating at their optimum. At the same time, we have seen some issues playing out at Kariba where the dam levels had waned, and you'd find that affected both power supply in Zimbabwe as well as in Zambia, as of course the Lake Kariba is a shared resource between the two countries, Zimbabwe as well as Zambia. And so with the El Nino that had affected the power supplies within Zimbabwe's borders, and that affected as well the country's industry, resulting in the decline where the manufacturing sector capacity utilization was concerned in 2024. Now, the news of there being an increase in terms of the dam levels, of course, at Kariba, and of course increased flows within the Zambezi River basin, that's speaks positives where the country's power situation is concerned, and obviously that would have a trickle-down effect where industry is concerned. From the recent CZI manufacturing sector survey, there was feedback from the market that one of the reasons that have been affecting the floors where the output of the sector is concerned, where industry is concerned, has been that to do with power. So with there being increased water levels at Kariba, you can expect to have the lights on. Of late, industry had been forced to rely on diesel, and the cost of producing a diesel capacity is of course about double what it would translate to if you are to use what ZESA is able to provide for. So that would improve the power situation again in Zimbabwe. But then again, the issue of the antiquated equipment in Hwange remains a concern. So while this would be a positive, more needs to be done to allay the fears of industry for the rest of 2025.
All right, and in terms of dollars and cents, what does this mean for the Zimbabwean economy?
Well, of course, from the tourism perspective, there have been some reports that have been circulating in 2024 about how the levels had receded and affecting, of course, where Victoria Falls was concerned. But of course, with this particular development, it means that there is more water that is flowing through the Zambezi River Basin, and of course more flows flowing through the Victoria Falls. At the same time, when you move up to the Kariba Dam, it means there is more water in that particular dam, and there can be more activities with those vessels that are there that can carry people. And of course, this also speaks to the fishing. There's a lot of fishing that happens where the economy of Kariba is concerned. So obviously, this would have a trickle-down effect of increasing, of course, what flows through the national purse as a result.
All right, now time for us to take a breather. After the break, we'll continue looking at some of the highlights that came from the cabinet briefing meeting. Don't go anywhere. The Mint will be right back.
Harare, tune into the beat.
Capitalk 100.4 FM, your source for news, business, sports, fashion, and more.
Experience the pulse of Harare's culture and lifestyle.
Capitalk 100.4 FM, Harare's top radio station.
Join the conversation with Zimbabwe's top personalities.
Subscribe now for fresh and infotainment content daily.
Capital 100.4 FM, Harare's heartbeat.
Welcome back to The Mint. I'm Cecilia Kamputa, and we're joining you live from Mars Etienne Studios in Harare, Zimbabwe. Now, we continue with some of the highlights that came from the cabinet briefing meeting, where the Information Minister, Dr. Jennifer Muswero, also touched on the expansion of the Zimplats sulfur dioxide abatement plant in Mashonaland West, which is on track, and the establishment of the Disco Carbon Steel plant in Chivumvuma, Mashonaland East, and the Midlands provinces, which is 100% complete. We listen to the Minister.
57th session of the Economic Commission for African Conference of African Ministers of Finance, Planning and Economic Development was held from the 12th to the 18th of March 2025 in Ethiopia. And Zimbabwe is the outgoing chair of both the committees of experts, and the 56th Bureau handed over the chairmanship to Morocco. Under the implementation of the International Financial Services Center, completion and gazetting of the International Financial Service Centers is on course, and the nationwide venture capital fund investment projects are on course. The crafting of the National Development Strategy 2 is on course in terms of economic growth and stability pillar of the National Development Strategy 1. The Minister of Mines and Mining Development highlighted the following projects under his purview. The establishment of an online permit system is at 90% in terms of completion. The drafting of the mineral development policy is at 96% in terms of completion. And the construction of the Palm River Energy Plant in Beitbridge is on course. The expansion of the Zimplats sulfur dioxide plant in Mashonaland West Province is on course. And the establishment of the carbon steel plant in Chivumvuma, both in Mashonaland East and Midlands provinces, is 100% complete. Cabinet received a report on the official opening of the 65th edition of the Zimbabwe International Trade Fair.
Now, even when we look at the Zimplats sulfur dioxide abatement plant, how important is the new plant?
Look, you've got to understand that Zimbabwe is currently the third largest platinum group metals producer behind South Africa and Russia, and is home to the world's second largest platinum group metals reserves that's behind South Africa. So when we look at the operations of Zimplats and their contribution to the global PGM's value chain, it's quite significant. Now, Zimplats has made it very clear that over the next now 9 years, they are going to inject about $1 billion into Zimbabwe's platinum group metals value chain, of course leveraging on their relationship with their parent Anglo-American Platinum in South Africa, which is listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. So this would speak to the value addition that they would be able to glean at the end of the day. So when you look at just how much they're producing in the Zimbabwean economy where platinum group metals are concerned, you look at palladium, you look of course at several other resources, iridium, that are part and parcel of the platinum group metals, without of course forgetting platinum. This would allow value addition to be taking place within Zimbabwean borders. Of course, some value addition is taking place, but the greater chunk of it is being done in South Africa. So this will allow a greater degree of value addition to be taking place in Zimbabwe and contribute increasingly toward Zimbabwe's fiscus going forward.
And when we look at the platinum group metals output for Zimbabwe, can you speak to the figures?
Look, at the end of the day, we are looking at some of the trends that have been taking place within the platinum group metals value chain globally. When you speak to how things have played out from a figures perspective, you notice that platinum group metals have been down about 25% over the past 18 months, owing to how there has been a decline in growth, where of course the Chinese economy has been concerned. So there has been some indication in terms of there being a recovery in 2025. But then again, when you look at the trade war that's been brought up by the United States of America with the tariffs, I think a lot hangs in the balance to find out how things will pan out and eventually how that will trickle down where the value of PGMs are concerned going into the future. So it remains to be seen how things pan out with the tariffs war that Donald Trump is raging.
Now, and another issue that ties together mining is the issue of environment, and Dr. Muswere also highlighted a series of environmental initiatives aimed at promoting sustainability and protecting the country's natural resources. These efforts include the rehabilitation of wetlands, planting of indigenous trees, fruit tree cultivation, improved waste management practices, and the installation of automatic weather stations.
In terms of environment protection, climate resilience and natural resources management pillar in terms of the National Development Strategy 1, The Minister of Environment, Climate and Wildlife highlighted the following achievements in terms of projects. The rehabilitation of 200 hectares of the Dichwe wetland in Makonde district, Ward 4, for improved human well-being and economic management in terms of the ecosystem is on course. The restoration and protection of 154 hectares of the Chidobe wetland in Wange district, Ward 2 is on course. A total of 2,340 livestock and 400 households are already benefiting from the project. The establishment of a waste sorting and processing center at the Tafara Integrated Resource Recovery Center in Mavuko, Harare Metropolitan Province is on course. The construction of the state-of-art one-stop pavilion at Wange National Park main camp in Matavele North Province has reached 95% in terms of completion. The planting of a total of 4,000 indigenous trees on 2,494 hectares of land at Zamazama, Zungati, Cheza, Ananda and Poshai villages in Shurugu District, Midlands Province is on course. The planting of 52,000 fruit trees under the 45th Independence Plantation Legacy Project in Gokwe North and South districts is at 95% in terms of completion. And the installation of 15 prototype 3-dimensional printed automatic weather stations at 15 meteorological stations at Victoria Falls, Marondera, Wanke, Binga, Bight Bridge, Kezi, Rupike, Kadoma, Rishavane, Chipinge, Kanyemba, Mutoko, Mount Darwin, Chisumbanje and West Nicholson is on schedule.
Eben, we see so much work that is being done to rehabilitate wetlands. Can you speak to the significance of these wetlands to the ecosystem as a whole and also economically?
Look, the subject here, I think even through this very conversation has been that of climate change and how it is affecting human life, how it is affecting even wildlife. So the rehabilitation of these wetlands is very, very important as it contributes positively towards the climate change agenda, which is that of ensuring that the degree of the rise in global temperatures is moderated to some degree. So wetlands then play a pivotal role at that. But over and beyond that, Zimbabwe in the second half of this year will be hosting a climate change conference that is specific to the wetlands that will be taking place in Victoria Falls in the second half of the year. So it's also important that Zimbabwe takes a leading role and is able to demonstrate the progress that it is making. If at all that conference is happening in Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe should also be seen to be taking that leading role at a global scale in running with that particular agenda. So yes, indeed, it's important, some positive developments there, but I must hasten to indicate that it's also important from the EMA perspective, even from the municipalities, to see to it that they do not over prioritize construction projects on some of these wetlands, as has been the case in recent years. So I think some balance needs to be reached between the need to construct as well as the need to preserve these wetlands going forward from this particular point.
All right, Eben Mabunda, thank you very much for joining us today and also helping to unpack some of these highlights.
It's a pleasure.
Now, that is all we had for you in today's episode of The Mint. Good afternoon, pleasant viewing, and happy Workers' Day.